Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was a melodious voice which will remain forever with us of Padma Vibhushan Pandit Jasraj. Khan Sahab, I was fortunate to be spending time with Pandit Jasraj at Pantnagar in Hyderabad through Speak Mackey. So it's a great loss for the music world. Today, on Vinayak Chaturthi, we wish all the attendees, my panelist Dr. Khan, a very happy Vinayak Chaturthi. Friends, today we have someone, who brings the entire ag value chain, professionals, corporates, farmers on a single platform. But today he has agreed, taken out his time to be with Ray Talks, to talk to all of us and share his vision for agriculture, not just for in India, but India's role in international agriculture. Dr. M.J. Khan. Khan Sahab, आपका स्वागत है. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, and wish you all the happiness and good of the occasion of Ganesha Chaturthi.
Thanks, Doctor. On behalf of all the attendees, I thank for that. Now, see, today, as I said, the topic is India's role in international agriculture. Ray Talks so far has been bringing ag value chain so far with about India's way of looking. We did have international speakers from the US and Australia, but today let us understand what India is offering and has to offer to the global agriculture scenario. Before I go with the discussion with Dr. M.J. Khan, let me briefly introduce Dr. Khan. Of course, almost everybody who's involved in agricultural operations, ag value chain, is known. Sorry, they know Dr. Khan, but let me introduce from my end. Dr. Khan is a founder chairman of Indian Chamber of Food and Agriculture. M.J. Khan Sahab has made noticeable contributions to the Indian and global food and agriculture sector. Dr. Khan launched Agricultural Today Group, an Indian Council of Food and Agriculture. He also launched International Agriculture Consulting Group in 2011 for providing Indian expertise in food and agriculture to the Asian and African countries to help India forge better ties. His vision through ICFA is working as the apex level policy research and trade facilitation body and national knowledge resource center for food and agriculture sector in India, and also serving as a global platform for partnerships, technology, investments, and agribusiness services. Dr. Khan led delegations of agricultural stakeholders to various innumerable countries, of which some of the prominent are Israel, Holland, France, Germany, China, the USA, Denmark, Poland, France, and the UK. During his 2.5 decades long career, Dr. Khan served the government of Uttar Pradesh in Animal Husbandry Department, global major Glaxo India and Veterinary Division, Indian conglomerate EID Parry in seeds business, and the Indian Agrochemicals Association before starting a knowledge sector enterprise in agriculture. Dr. Khan graduated in agriculture from Meerut University, post-graduated in business management from AMU Aligarh, and obtained PhD in agribusiness management from Prescott University, UK. So Dr. Khan Sahab, you're welcome to this Ray Talks.
Thank you.
So I also would like to quickly take you through the Ray Consulting and what it does. I, Raj, founded Ray Consulting after a long 25-year stint in the agri industry, having worked with companies like Rallis, Cheminova, VI Industries, and Nagarjuna Fertilizers. I felt there was a space for agri consulting in India, and we could do with an integrated platform in the agri domain. With its substantial experience to the diversified agriculture sector, we advise leading players across in India and Southeast Asia on a range of strategic, commercial, and operational issues. Our deep agribusiness sector expertise and growth strategy development capabilities enable us to deliver uniquely rich insights that lead to meaningful impact to our clients on growth strategy, M&A, go-to-market commercial strategy for the business performance improvement. So with that, I would start chatting with Dr. Khan. Khan sir, before I come to the subject on India and international agriculture, I was curious to know from you that what made you, take a route when you started, no Indian agriculture profession thought of and created a niche in agri consulting policies and bringing the agri sector on a single platform that made you to be on your own. And today, you are one of those pioneers in the country who bring all the agri value chain professionals, whether it is government, whether it is corporate or a farmer, on the same platform, whether it is digital agriculture, whether it is a manufacturing. Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, the big father of Indian agriculture, is part of ICFA. So what made you to take this route and journey?
Thank you, Raj. In fact, let me congratulate you for the series of the talks that you have started. In fact, this is also very, very innovative thing.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bringing the stakeholders on a dialogue platform to understand their experiences, to understand their thought processes, to understand their contributions, and talk about it so that people can learn and try to emulate and replicate.
Yes.
Now, coming back to your question, I have a village background, born in a district called Lakhimpur near Lucknow, and first 20 years having spent in the village. And I remember 6 to 8 class, 3 kilometers away my school. So rainy days we actually used to swim to reach my school, and the books I used to keep in a plastic bag and float it on the water.
My God.
That was a situation, and we could see the electric poles only when I entered my graduation year. So with that background of village, and then having studied agriculture, went to Panagar also, but could not complete the MSc agriculture. So returned back to join MBA. So all these years that, about first 7 years that I was in agriculture sector, working for different corporates, and more importantly, the Agrochemical Association, which brought me in touch with the top policymakers on one hand, and the industry leadership on the other hand. We realized that the knowledge component in agriculture was lacking badly. In the name of knowledge generation and knowledge sharing in agriculture, it was only confined to a very limited extent, in a very small, narrow spectrum, to the delivery of technologies, and with that, the knowledge of the farmers through the KVKs on one hand, and through the product delivery and associated knowledge by the industry on the other hand. So this was very, very limited. In the same years, there was a planning commission report also on farmers spending on crop production. The various inputs were analyzed. The lowest spending was found to be on the knowledge input, which means farmers spent about, let's say, 7-8 rupees out of 100 on fertilizers, some 4-5 rupees on crop protection, similar amount on seeds, similar amount on 1 rupees or less or more on farm mechanization and mechanical operation, then post-harvest and so on. But his spent on knowledge was extremely low. I think it was some 0.9 paisa, something like that, out of 100 rupees spent on raising the production. So knowledge makes a lot more different. If all other factors remain the same, good knowledge can make it many times more difference, or at least enhance the productive use of other inputs that are applied. So the knowledge component in agriculture, as said, knowledge businesses in agriculture and consulting businesses, the services in agriculture were completely lacking. In fact, in the year 2003, which was of course much later, there was a conference also in Vigyan Bhavan. So the spending on knowledge in the rural businesses, in agriculture businesses, and in the rural areas as such, this was a very new field. In fact, If you look at early modernization of agriculture and the formal kind of involvement of industry in agriculture, it started with the tea gardens management by the companies during the British time. Many years, many decades later came the fertilizer, chemical fertilizers, then crop protection products, then in the same time farm machineries were developed, and later the organized seed production program when the hybridization programs became successful. But all these years, if you look at, there was no agriculture services available. There was no agriculture research other than the research that is carried out by the ICR system, which is more on the production side research. There was no analysis, no consulting, no advisory, no advertising, and these kind of businesses were non-existent. So during 90s, late 90s, I was realizing that soon will come a time that the knowledge businesses will explode. There will be huge opportunities for, let's say, equity research companies, let's say, financial research companies, let's say, market research companies, let's say, advertising, the entire spectrum of knowledge management. In fact, we used to say the universities themselves are also the knowledge management units. So knowledge that is generated in the classroom, that is taken to the field, and then finally delivered to the farmers. So this is one set of deficiency that we are observing, that knowledge component is missing in agriculture sector. With the latest knowledge, we can enhance the productivity of all other inputs that are being put to use. Then comes the post-harvest part. The market information system was lacking, or it was very basic level. The weather system, information system was lacking. The global market opportunities, that information was not there. And even if the information was provided by the All India Radio and some of the government institutions, how to make best use of the knowledge, which means the services sector that should have been there was not there. So starting with the launch of the Agriculture Today magazine, in fact, before that we launched Pesticide World magazine, because we realized that there was a magazine known as Pestology, but that was research-based magazine. Some technical articles by the scientists, whereas the industry was performing very well and it needed a very focused trade magazine for the industry. So we started with that, and then came Agriculture Today, then came a consulting company in 96, Concept Agrotech Consultants Limited. Then the year 2000, we created Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, a very large farmer support platform. Then 2007, we created Institute of Agribusiness Management in NCR. So like that, there have been a series of, in fact, we launched Agriculture Today in Telugu also in 2006 or 7. In Hindi, of course, it was there. In a sectoral magazine, we launched Seed Today, we launched Fertilizer Today, we launched Veterinary Today. So like that. So we looked at various ventures, and then some we called off after some time like that. So there has been a very, opportunities have been knocking our doors. Even today, there are a large number of opportunities will remain unexplored, unutilized, and there are the professionals like you and me in the years to come, they will actually leverage upon. Good thing is that a lot of agri startups are now looking at small opportunities, and they are making it big into big opportunities. Thank you.
So awesome, and you are one of those early, to understand, to realize all these things. And it might have been a tough journey to bring all these people to make understand. Other than, as you said, the research was only, ICER institutions, not even so much of agriculture universities. So it was a tough time for you probably to bring all of them together.
In fact, let me tell you, we were the first one who started recruiting services in agriculture. Nobody had this. I missed out. In fact, Concept Agrotech Consultants Limited, under that agrijobs.com was the platform launched. So we were the first one, nowhere in the country, focused, dedicated agriculture recruiting consulting activity that was just not there. So we were absolutely not only pioneer in terms of operations, we were also pioneers in terms of ideating that something like this could happen. Then of course came the next level where some platforms were to be created. In fact, we forgot to mention that year 99, we started a series of members of parliament meeting on agriculture.
Wow.
So first roundtable of the members of parliament on agriculture that took place in 99, and thereafter every year we used to have about 20-25 members of parliament, 4 or 5 ministers, and there's industry CEOs and some vice chancellors and top leaders. So like that. There are many new initiatives that we did. Of course, we created All India Farmers Alliance, where some 40 large farmers bodies are on board. There has been a lot of involvement at the government level. Also, many committees I have been part of, including on the board of Manage Hyderabad. But bringing this industry and government together, there are many issues. In fact, I recall still one member of parliament, K. Eran Naidu, very popular MP from Andhra Pradesh, he suggested that I should be holding a roundtable not on agriculture or farmers issue, which is a very large agenda. Of course, we must do, but we must look at the sectoral issues like roundtable on crop protection, roundtable on seeds, roundtable on fertilizer, roundtable on mechanization. So many years later, actually, when we launched the Indian Council of Food and Agriculture in 2015, so 2016 onwards, we started hosting the CEOs meeting on sectoral issues. So starting with the poultry, we went on farm mechanization, farm fertilizer, then crop protection. So almost each segment, we listed down 92 areas which required a focused discussion. So about 40 we could do. So a large number of initiatives bringing different stakeholders on one platform. In fact, the recently launched a micro food enterprises scheme of the government, which is rupees 10,000 crore scheme to help 5 lakh small food units to become the formal sector units. So that was also an idea that we pursued for a long time. In fact, public-private partnership in agriculture was my idea, which in 2003, the Secretary of Agriculture, Radha Singh, picked it up and she actually put it into formal shape. So there are a large number of initiatives. In fact, one area which we thought of and we started one course at Manage was the agriculture media 2 years course. So this was my idea. Goel Saab was the Director General and we started that, but it became a poor cousin of the MBA in agriculture because they were getting higher packages. We have to be getting lesser, so somehow it didn't carry on for long. But there are many innovations that all the time that we kept on thinking what new things can be done in agriculture. So what I've told you in the last 5 minutes is only 5% of what is yet to be told.
Absolutely. No, I understand. I mean, see, like I attend all your conferences in Delhi that happen, where, typically how an economic forum is held. So you have the policymakers, the politicians, the ministers, the bureaucrats, corporates, and the farmers, all on the same platform. And very rarely, one gets an opportunity to exchange ideas and talk and come out with something which is good to the country. Awesome, Daksa. So you're right. I think 5% is probably there. So we will chat in thing, or probably I need to have a series of talks with you to understand what exactly is, you do and then how it helps.
Another series that we started, which you just mentioned in 2008, we were thinking of the previous 5 years that we needed to create a national level awards in India in agriculture. Yes. So we had a meeting which was chaired by the Governor Haryana at the Haryana Bhavan, where the DG of ICR, Secretary of Agriculture, many eminent persons, about 15% attended. So this was year 2005. We finalized everything, but committee insisted that you should do it after 4 months. I told him that either I will do it in 30 days or it cannot happen. So nobody agreed to that. He said, first time you are doing it of this eminence, you cannot do it. So it didn't happen. 2006, again, the same thing happened. The committee sat and everything was finalized. Again, nobody agreed to give me time less than 3 months. Next year, I said nothing doing. I give my time. So 30 days time, and the function that took place in 2008, the Speaker Lok Sabha, he termed it as the best function ever attended by.
Great.
In 2008. So that series of Agriculture Leadership Summit and Agriculture Leadership Awards and the launch of Agriculture Yearbook, these three together were carried on, and these are continuing even now, except of course this year because of the COVID. But last 12 years without any guide. Very successful platform, many ministers. In fact, 2009, I remember, on the closing panel, there were 7 secretaries Government of India sitting.
Wow.
One panel. And when we launched the Agriculture Council, Indian Council of Food and Agriculture, 2015, it was to be launched by the Honorable Prime Minister, but he had to attend a UN meeting. So number 2, Rajnath Singh launched it. 2 governors, in addition to him, were on the dais. And in the audience, there were about 20-25 ambassadors and equal number of the secretaries of government. Hugely, and 9 agriculture ministers of different states. So it was and then you can imagine the corporates and others. So this has been a very powerful platform to bring together. In fact, I must thank Professor Swaminathan. He is not keeping well now. We all know that 95 years, and I could speak last month, so it's difficult for him to speak. He has been a very powerful source of support and inspirations. I remember 2008, 9, 10, 11, he used to write 200, 300 letters for me for this conference as the member of parliament. He used to spend time in Delhi because he got into Rajya Sabha in 2007. So 2007 to 2013, he was in Delhi almost because being the member of Rajya Sabha. So he has been a constant support of support and strength, inspiration. And in fact, his entire family, many people think as if I am in his relation. At least 3 or 4 occasions when Secretary Agriculture wanted to speak to Professor Swaminathan, his PS called on my number, saying that Professor Swaminathan, I told him I am in Delhi, he is in Chennai. So much went the information around, and this that two of us worked so closely together. He's a great man.
I'll tell you, just since you mentioned MS Swaminathan, it's an institution by himself. And last year, a little earlier to that, I was in Pune airport, and I saw him sitting on a wheelchair, and I couldn't resist myself. I was with Dr. Mohan Rao of Pasura, so both of us went and wished him, greeted him, and then I asked him, Professor, what are you doing? He said, I can't be at home. I know at least 20, 25 days in a month I need to travel. That's kind of a person, and he's the person that available at. When it's for the agriculture, he's always available. And thanks to you, I think you used and since took his guidance and spirit in the development of agriculture.
Almost 40 such occasions, if I recall correctly, must be there when Professor Swaminathan made his presence, even though it's very small meetings. For example, budget review meeting, we hardly had 20 people. I sent a message, you have to come, he immediately came. Launch of seed today, again we have some 20-25 people, he came to launch that. Launch of veterinary today, he was in Delhi, he again joined.
Yeah, wow.
3 times he came.
Family man, obviously.
My office, at this age, coming to my office, 3 times he came to my office in the last 5 years.
Wow.
So that speaks something great of him, and of course.
We are fortunate to have a person of him, for Indian agriculture. We are really fortunate in India.
To our country, I tell you, I quote an example. Just an instance, 3 years back, I was at the World Food Summit in the US. It's a very large gathering at Iowa State, Des Moines. So Professor Swaminathan was sitting in the first row. I was also sitting in the first row. So one neighbor next to me, she was ex-president of Nigeria. When I introduced myself, the first sentence she asked, Professor Swaminathan. I told her he's sitting 3 chairs next to me.
Oh.
She went to him, half bent, she talked to him for 10 minutes. Professor remained seated, and ex-president of Nigeria. So there was not a single speaker who would not start his speech with the name of Professor Swaminathan.
Absolutely.
In the world gathering of the most eminent people, where the Chelsea Clinton and such people were there, the president of the World Bank, and this kind of profile, people used to take name of Swaminathan almost invariably in every speech that I had. So this is the eminence of professor.
Awesome. So doctor, let me start now to the India and the international agriculture. My first point I would like to know from you is how Indian agriculture was shaped by international cooperation, because you are involved in so many things. So what do you feel about this?
If you see the Indian civilization, so early civilization days when the agriculture started, it started with the first man on the earth. He had to eat something. So as we believe that God provided seed and provided the environment, soil and everything conducive for the germination. So Indus Valley civilization, if you look at, Harappan civilization, if you look at, so early agriculture started along that, and the water availability in this region was plenty. So early learnings and experiences of India, because the human civilization started in this part of the world, that's what we believe. And with that, it started agriculture. If you look at the National Agriculture Science Center, there is a museum which shows early civilization and the growth of agriculture, goes along with that. So these were the initial days. But later on, as the modern agriculture, what we say, let's say in the beginning of the 20th century, the international collaboration, learnings, experiences, as the travels became easy, and people started looking at the colonization, like the British came to India. So the first, if you look at the first experiences of the British from around the world, they were brought to India for the modern agriculture when the agriculture research center was established in Bengal, then brought to Pusa Institute in Samastipur, and then later 1912 or 1930, I think 1912 only, shifted to New Delhi, which we know today as Indian Agriculture Research Institute. So the first time that Indian agriculture got the global experiences of modern management of agriculture, where the learnings brought in by the British who were ruling half of the world. So to Bengal famine, if you recall that how many million people had died, so that alarmed the people around the world sensitized. So that were the early days that the global agriculture had a participation or a positive contribution. But many years later, if you say that when the fertilizer and chemical inputs, fertilizer and pesticide were discovered, so these are the two important inputs. Seed, of course, were locally produced. But if you look at the fertilizers, if you look at the pesticide, and later on the farm machinery, so tractors and all that, that came from the international advancement that happened in Europe and US and elsewhere. But in the context of what we define as the agricultural collaboration and cooperations, the very substantial thing to mention is that Green Revolution period and the role of dwarf varieties, the Mexican seeds, imported wheat that was brought in, and that actually showed the seed of Green Revolution. And rest is the history, that how Paddock brothers' prophecy of doomsday that Indians will have no choice but to die of hunger, that was proven wrong. So Green Revolution is credited to actually prove the prophets of the doomsday around the world who were very sure about Indians dying of hunger. There is no future of Indians, they thought. So Green Revolution proved all of them wrong. And the significant role that was played by was the CIMMYT, where from we got the modern seeds. So this is the third stage of international cooperation. And fourth comes as the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research was founded, CGIAR, which today has about 18 institutes, including one in Hyderabad, we know ICRISAT. So formal global cooperation started with the ICRISAT came into being, but before that the FAO got into formation as a global body, as a UN promoted body. So FAO actually facilitated a lot of cooperation. So many learnings of the world agriculture brought in by the FAO, brought in by or shared by the CGIAR institution, and at the same time that Indians large number went to study in US universities. They brought in their knowledge, including early day Dr. Jayant Patil from Maharashtra, who studied in the US, and later on he became the member Planning Commission Agriculture. So many individuals who went around different countries, especially the United States, those learning. So these institutional cooperations and collaborations and the learnings that were brought to the advantage of the farmers. At the same time, World Bank funded, if you recall, that T&V project, training and visit project, that was launched by the World Bank that remained till I think late 70s. So when the funding started drying. So multiple operations, multiple organizations involved, multiple learnings and multiple formats of collaboration and cooperation put together, that had a very important bearing in terms of the growth in the production that we saw, in terms of modern innovations and modern practices that were to be adopted, and the post-harvest management, which is a newer area. But now as we see that the whole country's attention is focused on the post-harvest management and connecting the farmers to the market, whether the institutions of agri-clinic, agri-business, or the institution of FPOs now, or the institution of agri-startups. So all these are newer developments, but this all has in its perspective the global learnings and the collaboration and cooperation through ICR, which has about 400 MOUs in place, and many of the private sector companies that also played important role, multinational companies with either German-based agrochemical giants or US-based farm machinery giants. These all played a role here in this agriculture development of this country.
That's nice. That was more of, when it comes to cooperation, how India got benefited. Now let me take you through think from India's point of view, how India can shape the world in agriculture with its expertise and experiences currently?
I think this is a very good question and very appropriate time. India's learnings, if you see, are very, very vast, very diverse, and every type of agriculture which is there in any country in the world is found in one part or the other of India. Any crop which is grown in any part of the world is grown in one part or the other of India. Any animal which is grown anywhere is kept is in some part of the country. So we have a very diverse agroclimate. In fact, 16 agroclimatic zones that we have, from coastal region, one of the longest coastal regions, coast line that India has got, one of the largest desert area that India has got, one of the largest mountainous range that India has got, and very large plain land. So every kind of soil is found in India. Every kind of agroclimatic condition is found in India, and a very huge genetic diversity that India has got. Therefore, the diversity of Indian agriculture, one side, and all the countries probably of the world put together on the other side. This is one statement I would like to. Second, if you look at the diversity of the farmers themselves, very small farmers, which has about 1,000 square meter of land, he does some intensive vegetable growing cultivation, and he manages his 2 times food. Then medium scale farmers, large scale farmers, and very, very large scale corporate farmers. So the diversity of India's farming systems, the diversity of India's farmers, the diversity of agribusinesses, from very small, 10 square meter area, he makes some pesticide, to a very large modern factories and so on. Similarly, a very small blacksmith who produces some pharmacy to a very large manufacturer of tractor. So every kind of agri businesses, every kind of agri manufacturing, every kind of farming operations, and every kind of farmer that exists here in this country. So therefore, if you look at today's opportunity in the context of Africa, where the whole world is focused, or if you look at some of the South Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries, if you reverse India in time by 25 to 30 years, we are exactly where the entire Africa is today, which means our learnings of the last 25, 30 years are meeting the exact requirements of Africa today. So therefore, US can contribute funds, Japan can contribute funds, Europe can have institutional partnership with Africa, but none of them can have the experiences which Africa need. This is only India which has got. Every kind of agriculture that is there in Africa, in all the 54 countries, in fact, the entire African continent put together has the same population which India has got. Entire Africa put together has almost same biodiversity which India has got. And cultural affinity in Africa. So Africa's transformation can be only with the root of food and agriculture. And if one country in the world, and the country alone, can contribute to the Africa's agriculture revolution, it is India. And now under South-South plan, India is contributing to that. If you look at local formation of SARC Agriculture Center and so on, so that is one side is there. But to make the difference in African agriculture, it is the Indian expertise, it is the Indian technology, it is the Indian low-cost inputs available, and so on. So these are going to make a difference, and the difference is being made already because large number of Indians are involved in agriculture, large number of Indian companies are involved in agriculture, and large number of Indian institutions under South-South plan and under credit line of the Exim Bank, they are making a difference in the African agriculture. And I hope that agri-businesses, which are the next level of agricultural production, I'm sure that a very key role that Indians and Indian learnings are going to play in the agri-business development of African continent.
That's something very good comparison you gave, what we are today and what we were 25 years back and where the other continent is, and how our experience became 20 years since then could contribute to the global agriculture, especially from African point of view. And I see a lot of contribution, especially in terms of inputs being given to African countries, including the huge lands have been taken by the Indian farmers to cultivate. The corporates are established there very well. Is it locked out? Yeah, I think for a split second you went away. Yeah, Dr. Khan is back. Yeah, that was good, Doctor. Now, let me take you through, from the current context, I would like to touch upon on each vertical. So let me start, besides, contributing the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. If I look at from the business point of view, uh, exports of fruits, for example, vegetables, especially fruits, grains, ready to eat are growing phenomenally from India to rest of the world. Where you see this will lead to for India to be identified as a preferred supplier to the world. Like today, if you walk into, like my son who's in the US, for him it is not difficult to find a chapati. He says to Papa, Haldiram, his mother is worried, but he says not to worry. I got a Haldiram chapati. It's as good as fresh chapati made by you. So where do you see India's exports from fruits to grains to ready to eat, like for example, basmati and all those things?
Thank you very much. It's also, again, a very, very relevant question. In fact, we have been talking about and taking a very pride in saying that agricultural diversity of India and its ability to actually feed the world, but equally huge diversity in food systems also.
Yes.
The way the agriculture, very diverse agriculture production system we have equally or in fact more diverse the food system that we have. And the taste of Indian foods, if any foreigner tastes it once, he becomes regular to Indian restaurant.
Kebabs.
Many things. In fact, so therefore, now it is time that in addition to focusing on the exports of agri products, it is time to focus on the ready-to-eat meat and huge diversity, huge taste, huge preferences, all that, and the spices that we use that blend. In fact, foreigners are not very used to that, but once they taste it, they become used to that. So that is a market, that is a sentiment, that's an opportunity that we need to leverage upon. So today, we have about $39 billion of agri export that includes processed food also. Half of that comes under EPIDA basket, $19 billion, and half that goes to tea board, coffee board, spices board, and MPIDA, and so on. In fact, fisheries is the single largest, second largest the export after rice. So the Prime Minister has given the task of making it $60 billion by 2022. And I'm pretty sure because a group of ministers last Friday I was sitting with, so Finance Minister, Commerce Minister, Foreign Minister, the Defense Minister, everybody was in that group. So we were discussing informally when the presentations were over, and I told that we are very confident, to which Commerce Minister immediately agreed, that before the closing of 2022, we should be able to touch $60 billion rather going beyond. And by 2025, the Prime Minister has given the task of reaching to $100 billion. We are pretty right on the track. We should be able to. But large part of that has to come from what you initially gave remarks about, that the India's advantage in food systems, the huge variety, the diversity, the taste, the culinary skills, and the every 100 kilometers you have a very different kind of food being produced. So all that need to be popularized through whatever means of promotion that are available must be.
Good. See, like one of my Ray talks earlier, we had leaders from INI Farms, Sayagri, and then Sam Agri, and they say there's a huge opportunity for us to move out and then show to the world that what India can do in exports. So moving from there, Daksa, organic cultivation, organic agriculture. In India, yes, it has got more into from production point of view. I'm not too sure how much is a consumption awareness of consumption or consuming is still at a particular segment. It is still not percolated to a lot of other segments. But if you look at the exports, if you look at the globally, like especially developed countries, organic food has become a part of their life. So you feel that Indian farmers should adapt to more of organic cultivation and then tie up with this organic marketing companies and then see for the exports?
I think this push to organic agriculture that started in the year 2001 and 2 in the Vajpayee government, and the first International Organic Congress that I hosted at Barapani, just 20 kilometers before Shillong. So at the ICR headquarters for Northeastern region. So there we formulated Northeast organic plans, and based on that, national organic plans were formulated few years later. So 2005, if I correctly recall, there was an International Organic Conference in Delhi 2 years after we hosted in Barapani. There has been tremendous push to the organic agriculture, but proportionate push to the organic foods marketing or exports has not taken place, because if you look at large parts of the country are organic by default. You look at Madhya Pradesh, many areas, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Himalayan region and the northeastern region. So many parts of this country are organic by default. What we needed was, with little efforts, we needed to make that organic by process and obtain the certificates. Government did place emphasis on that area also, but the shortcut that some of the initial players in the organic food that they adopted, resulting into the foreigners' confidence level of the authenticity of the organic food of Indian origin, there has been a question mark. As a result, where we should have been accounting for anywhere between $5 to $10 billion of the organic exports today, we are stuck at less than 1 billion. I think this may be $600 million of the organic food exports from India, which is a very, very area of big concern, that when we are accounting for almost 8.5% of the global agriculture, our share in the organic market is not even 1%. Out of $100+ billion of the global market, we are in about $600-700 million, which is pathetic. However, the opportunity is big. What we need to do is, 1, maintain quality; 2, maintain a strict enforcement of the certification system; and 3, focus promotion in the key markets. So I think the entire value chain development, but most importantly, the maintain the quality to maintain the confidence of the buyers. That is important.
I think you make sense. Like, especially if you look at the all said and done, Indian farmers has got issues in terms of cost of cultivation. But if it looks at global markets, I think we are still cost competitive, and it will help not only getting export, but a good exchequer also.
Organic foods, I tell you, because the buyers are the upper end, the rich class. Yes. So therefore, the cost is not as much a factor as the reliability, as the confidence in the quality, as the confidence in the supply chain, confidence in the certification system, and being available at the good supermarket stores. Indian brand should be showcased at popular and famous food stores across the Europe, across the developed world. So that is more important than probably the costing part of it.
Yeah, I think, see, now currently I know few companies who are positioning themselves as an individual corporates. Probably, how is this idea, suppose we come out with, Indian organic produce, maybe from the support of government and the export council or stuff like that, they could play a role. And then we can create a brand of organic for the global markets.
I tell you, your question is so good, because unless you are able to sell your country, you cannot sell your products.
Absolutely.
You cannot sell your company, you cannot sell your products. So first of all, you'll have to create a global perception about India being strong, being very consistent in quality. And then once you sell the country, because today the perceptions shape the decisions.
Yes.
So therefore, once we are able to establish that India is a place of reliable supplies of organic food, then comes which company and which products. So these are the secondary and tertiary decisions. So actually, this is the first thing to start with.
Yeah. Now, continuing on this, we speak about the trust of the country as a brand. One of the things that being looked for is a traceability, for example. Now, I think most of the companies are getting into the traceability aspect, like the produce right from farmer to the consumer. So that's one big thing. So related to that, not necessarily traceability, but beyond that, that India is known for generally in software technology. Now, I feel the technology that is developed for small and marginal farmers in India is not only adopted by Indian farmers, but are sought after in developing countries too, like especially Southeast Asian countries or African countries. Can India be the leader in this space as it is in the software segment for the IT giants?
I
So
think,
a lot of startups who are very they're
I think
very aggressive.
there's every ingredient is available, critical mass is available. Whatever it needs for India to become a superpower in this area, that is available. What is required is little more entrepreneurship. If you talk about the trade and exports and new age agriculture, today we need to create at least 1,000 agri export startups to take forward the opportunities available. Because what happens is large exporters, they look at the large opportunity, but small opportunities are left out uncashed. So small startups, small exporters will look into that. For example, if you look at chia, that's a smart food. If you look at moringa, that is a smart food, but the size of opportunity may be small, but margins are huge. It is for the startup to look at small size of the opportunities with huge margin and very focused, specialized product range. So that is, I think, required. So a little more focused strategy required. We have also prepared a plan for doubling the agro exports. So that includes all that plans that need to be actually executed.
Now, Doctor, I'll move from, we'll wait for a second. I'm sure he'll rejoin. Yeah, Doctor, can you unmute? Can you please unmute? Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm saying that if clarity is there on the mobile, we can carry on. Otherwise, I will charge the laptop and after 10 minutes, we can restart.
I think next few minutes. No, it's fine. It's quite good enough. We'll
okay.
Go. Yeah. Now, I have, we'll move from this exports of, produce and services to something into the physical nature or the products, what we call. Now, you see, pesticides are manufactured in India and are globally exported. What do you think about it? Can India be competitive and quality-driven supplier to the world in agrochemicals?
Already, in fact, that's a huge opportunity and India has risen to the occasion. If you look at, there was a time when India used to account 10% of its total production value as exports. Today, the exports are greater than the domestic market, which means the entire globe, especially in the generic segment, the large Indian companies, that is starting with the UPL or to name then Gharda, then Rallis, and then many other companies that are exploring the global markets, and even a small company like Bharat Insecticide that has about 400 crores of exports. So Meg Money that has again about 500 crores of exports. So many of the companies which are not that big a brand in the domestic market are looking at the international opportunities and they are exporting technical grade pesticide. India is fortunately very competitive in the chemicals segment and more particularly the agrochemical segment. So this is an opportunity India must tap and is tapping, and it can be more aggressive. In fact, the loss of China post-COVID, which is what we are calculating, that can be a significant advantage to India. And last group of ministers meeting, in the presentation, we discussed that it is time for India to actually, the moving manufacturing bases from China, that India could be the top recipient of all that manufacturing bases, all that investment that is likely to move out from China instead of falling to East Asian countries. India could be the recipient. So a very comprehensive national strategy is also being worked out item-wise of how we could step up our production, how we could mobilize more investment, how we can tap more global market for each of these segments. So agrochemical is one of the focused items that the nation should be looking at and is looking at to benefit by.
Awesome. Now, moving to the thing, I have one last question to you. Then post that, we'll take questions from our audience and attendees. My friends, audience, once I have one more question to be Dr. Khan, you can pose some questions to see already hands have started raising. So I'll allow you to speak with Dr. Khan. So keep your hands up. After I finish, I'll surely take your question. Next up, now when we look at the farm machinery, I have seen that farm machinery like tractors, farm tools, they have better global acceptance. Like can Indian farm automotive companies compete with the best in the world, and how does it happen? Like if I look at Mahindra, if you look at our Sonalika, if you look at any brand, Tafe, all of them export. The Kerala Institute, Compo, their farm machinery tools are exported globally. So can this be increased further?
If you look at India's farm mechanization, the story has been that of tractorization.
Yes.
In fact, India having a very large number of small farmers and medium farmers, it should have been more of the small farm machinery and tools that should have dominated the mechanization landscape. But initially, our large players, they got into the tractors, and there was an institutional support system, also the banking system, which was financing the tractors and not financing the small farm machinery.
Absolutely, yes.
If you look at the farm machinery equipments, the range in a small country like South Korea, it is much more than what we had in India. So either we had blacksmith or small local regional players getting into farm machinery which was not of a good quality, or we had a very large manufacturer of tractors. So it is only in the last 10 years that we see that focus has shifted, or the equal focus is now laid on the farm mechanization, which means adoption of a small farm machinery, which is matching the world class. Now, so this is one part of this thing. So there is a little balance now achieved. In fact, in the years to come, the equipment, the farm machinery has to be more focused than the tractors. However, the global opportunity is, again, these tractors showed the path of that Indian tractors can be exported to the world market, including even the US market, where Massey Ferguson and Mahindras are exported. A small company 20 years back, Hoshiarpur Jalandhar manufacturing plant of international tractors, Sonalika Tractors, what we know, Sonalika Group. Today, it is one of the most significant player in the tractor business, having a very large export base. I happened to be in 2-3 farm machinery exhibitions worldwide, and I saw a very large, well-decorated booth of Sonalika tractors. So that is the change that has happened, that Indian manufacturers are looking at the global markets, no matter what the cost, no matter what the barriers, we have to be there. So that is the spirit that has taken Indian farm machinery manufacturers to the world market, both in terms of exhibiting it, in terms of collaborating for it, in terms of exporting what is available to be exported. So these are the new changes that very promising and very happy note that we can conclude this part of the discussion or the question that is asked.
I really liked your word of tractorization. It is not farm mechanization. That explains the entire thing. How much scope is there for farm mechanization. Like if you look at our farmers or the small entrepreneurs who develop this mechanized tools, there would be a huge opportunity for the exports. Next up, few hands have gone up. I would like you to please answer the questions from this inquisitive attendees. Let me go to Mustaq Saab. Mr. Mustaq Ali, can you unmute and speak to Dr. Khan? Introduce yourself, please. Yes, Mr. Mohammad Mustaq Ali. You can speak. Hello. Hello. Okay, I'll get back to you. Probably there's some issue with your audio. Let me go to Sachin Agarwal. Mr. Sachin, can you unmute and speak?
Yes.
Yeah. Introduce yourself, sir, and then you can speak.
Right. Sir, I'm Sachin Agarwal. Principally, I'm an academician, but I want to move into this business of agriculture, not as a, I'm not a, sir, there is no family business in agriculture or nothing like that. But I've been listening to a lot of your talks. And, see, my question is very simple. that Khan Saab talked about the base India has regarding export of chemicals used in agriculture. Now, the point which comes to my mind is there is a kind of dichotomy which gets created by this. I keep on listening that the developed world is moving towards organic food. And then at the same time, we say India is having a lot of potential for exporting agrochemicals which are used in the agriculture field. Sir, can you please clear this doubt? I mean, say 20 years down the line, if I want to start it as a business, if I want to take up as an entrepreneurial activity, what is the more potential field, the chemical-based agriculture or the organic-based agriculture?
I think there is a clarity in that, and there should be clarity in that. Agrochemicals will continue to have their role in agriculture production. In fact, there is a need for zoning. We can earmark the areas where the organic agriculture can be done, but food security, the two objectives. One is the food security, for which continuing use of agrochemicals as of now, as per the scientific opinions and research documents that are available, will have to depend on chemical agriculture or traditional agriculture for the foreseeable future. However, the global market opportunities as well as the domestic market opportunities in organic food, that is also not to be overlooked. Now, what is required is we can identify the areas. For example, the entire Sikkim has been declared that organic state. Mizoram has been declared as the organic state. Large parts of the northeastern state, including the low-lying areas of Assam, which is rice belt, upland even in Assam, can be converted into organic agriculture. Similarly, the individual exporters, the companies which are exporting or looking at the export opportunity for organic food, they can choose the crop which is in demand in foreign countries. They can choose the area where they can earmark it as the organic production system, and there is a certification system available, which is 3 years of processes are monitored, and then this certification is adopted. So while tapping the export market for agrochemicals is one part of it, because agrochemicals are produced in the factory. So there is no contamination. It cannot reach out automatically to any field. Right. This is one part of it. Agrochemicals export opportunity country must look at, and it is looking at, I think, about 20,000 crores of exports of agrochemicals, which is $3 billion is happening. At the same time, 95 to 97% agriculture is being done under a traditional system where the chemicals are being used. Over a period of time, gradually this has to reduce. As the domestic demand for organic, more safe food picks up and people are able to pay for it. But there is no substitute as of now. So there has to be balance between what is produced for export market, what is produced for the organic market of the country itself, and what is produced to meet the food security objective of the country. So this is, in my opinion, nowhere in the world it has been made 100% organic so far.
So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Sachin, for joining us. I think Mr. Mushtaq is back. Can we try for him again? Yes, Mr. Mushtaq. There seems to be some issue with your audio or something. We can see you. Hello. Mr. Mushtaq. Okay, I'll get back. Harish.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Harish, introduce yourself and you can put a question to Dr. Khan.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Raj sir, and good evening, MJ Khan, sir. It's very fortunate to join your session. And let me introduce myself. I am Harish. I have completed my BSc Agriculture, and now I am currently a postgraduate in Agribusiness and Plantation Management. And I have also worked with Adama India Private Limited as a product development junior executive. Okay. This is a short intro about me. And sir, I have only one question, sir. Sorry, I have two questions. Sorry. So one question is regarding, many times we see organic. Everyone are saying we want organic products. But I have learned in the plantation sector that if a product is going to be organic, it can be going for 1 or 2 sprays of pesticide. Then how can we say that is an organic product?
Thank you, Harish. In fact, two of us share the common background with you. So therefore, you are qualified to ask 2 questions. about
Sir.
your question, I tell you, okay, this is what the practice has been adopted by many of the exporters who claim to be exporting organic, but use some mix of chemicals into the bio fertilizers, biopesticides, or they silently, discreetly use spray of pesticide, then naturally it is not organic. And that is the reason that the confidence level of the importers in India's organic export has been low, resulting into India not tapping even 5% of its potential level. So I think that need to change, and law enforcement agencies as well as the certification agencies will have to be more strict on this count. What is your
Yes, yes, sir. Sir, another question. Sir, the second question is, when Modi ji has become the Prime Minister of India, he has announced that doubling of farmer income by 2020, which is further extended to 2022. Hello?
No, never 2020.
Sir.
It was beginning. It was 2022 only. So 2016.
Yeah, sir. Okay. So
2016 it was announced for 6-year period that by
yes, sir.
2022 we'll have farmers' incomes doubled. Now doubling farmers' income.
Yes, sir.
Doubling income, there is a committee also, Dalwai committee, which is income. So doubling income is not only by way of increasing the production. There are 6-7 more areas by which the income can be increased. For example, if the production is same and the income is the same, if the government of India doubles the procurement rates, then the farmers' income get doubled. If everything is the same, production gets doubled, then the income gets doubled. If everything is the same, if we are able to add value, double the price of the product in the market, or reduce the wastages, the income increases. So 6 factors that we have identified. In fact, just within a month of Prime Minister's announcement, I had the opportunity of meeting the Prime Minister, and I told him that, sir, you have given 6 years time. It can be done in 4 years time. He smiled. He said, how? So I told him that increasing the yield is not the only way. In fact, that is the last option. Often, if you look at, if you increase the yield, the prices, realization to farmers goes down. So
Yes,
there
sir.
are factors. For example, the value addition.
Yeah.
For example, the wastages, which are estimated at anywhere about 8 to 28%. Multiple, increasing the value of the production system, which is high value crops if you adopt. If you add the agri businesses into that. So there are many areas. If you reduce the cost of production, if you optimize the use of inputs, there are many ways by which you can increase the employment opportunity in the agriculture, which means some rural business activity that start taking place based on the agro produce. So there are many ways. Now coming to this, if you have seen the advertisements, the government has claimed that it has increased the procurement price by 50% across the board. So if that is so, if income estimation is done, then probably there must have been in the last 4 years, that is 2016, there must have been about 50% plus increase. So another 2 years time, the rest will have to be covered. Now, when we say 50% plus increase, it is after adjusting the inflation. In case if inflation is not counted separately, so even if there is no growth at all, 7 to 8 years time, the farmers' income doubled. We do nothing, inflation itself will double it. Other than inflation, we are talking about net incomes. So
Yes, sir.
Because of the higher procurement prices, because of the improvement in the yields, because of the reduction in the post-harvest losses, and there are many areas and some value addition and so on. So I think put together, a little better situation is emerging. Yes, Harish.
Thanks, Harish. Thanks for those 2 questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Before I go to another audience attending to put a question, there is a question from Mr. Sandesh Daksa. Okay, he says, what will be the role of hydroponics in the future?
Let me start saying that 2 interventions can define the future of agriculture. Number 1, the precision agriculture. And number 2, the commodity boards. precision agriculture will take care of everything, whatever we are talking about in terms of scientific advancement, in terms of best practices, in terms of minimum use of inputs and maximum output, in terms of quality improvement. So the open field experiments in the state of Tamil Nadu, starting from the Coimbatore, which is known as Tamil Nadu Precision Farming Project, that has demonstrated that in the open field condition, the tools of the precision agriculture can get you 100 to 400, 500% extra yield across the crops. In fact, in many crops, it has gone to 800% more under precision agriculture. In terms of quality improvement, it is anywhere between 25 to 40% better quality that is happening. So every concern that we have related to the production, the tools of precision farming agriculture takes care of that. So this is one part of it, where we reduce the cost of production, we improve the quality, we improve the yields, and we improve the value chain also. Then comes the second aspect, that how we should be able to tap the national market, the global market, the value addition, the reduction in the wastages, and adoption of the global best practices, as well as the traceability. So there comes the role of the commodity boards. Supposing there is a soybean board that will take care of all the concerns of soybean in entirety, right from the production technologies to the value chain and supply chain development, to the global market positioning, to the packaging, to the branding, everything is to be done. Similarly, if there is a grapes board, that will take care of what are the demands in the global market of the grapes, what quality grapes, what prices we should produce, what should be the packaging, what should be the branding, and back home, what are the varieties to be grown, how these are to be grown, what are the best technologies, and so on. So everything in entirety. So commodity boards and precision agriculture. In fact, in my report also on doubling farmers' income, only these two things I had emphasized. If country can go in for large scale precision farming agriculture, and if country can farm commodity specific boards, that will take care of it.
Hydroponics would be part of the precision farming.
Pardon?
Hydroponics.
Now coming to the hydroponics, the new technologies are being invented. If you look at in future, I say that agriculture will not be a field agriculture, it will be actually factory agriculture. So if you look at Japan, you look at Netherlands, there is a large number, even in US, in the bunkers, the military bunkers, deep below the earth, they are producing. So lighting chambers are being created, the vertical farming, multi-layer farmings, and chamber cultivation. So hydroponics is a system of producing with a controlled system where the water-based nutrient application. So there could be semi-hydroponics, there could be fully hydroponics, or there could be aeroponics also. So the concept of aeroponics is the more advanced concept. So in future, as we go for more precision agriculture, there will be the newer tools that are being adopted, and hydroponics is one of them. Aeroponics will be another. So the chamber cultivation, that the production has been perfected under the factory conditions, where the vertical farming and the controlled condition farming is being done. If you go into the chamber farming, you will find, if you have entered the ICU, that much hospital ICU, that much precaution they take.
Yes.
So I hope that while hydroponics, aeroponics, semi-hydroponics, vertical farming, chamber cultivation, lighting spectrum cultivation, where each plant, what exact lighting spectrum it needs, that has been deciphered. So the best of the quality can come out of the advanced tools that are available now. If you look at an entire Netherlands, was a beautiful view you get of the scientific advancement that is at work.
Thanks, Doctor. Now I'll take last two quick questions and then Kanchan Bagla, are you there? Kanchan Bagla, can you unmute and speak, please? Hello. Okay. Yes. Go ahead, please. Okay, I'll get back to you. Dr. SK Sahu. Dr. SK Sahu, can you unmute and?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes. Good afternoon.
Yes.
Mr. Raj sir, thank you so much, sir, for arranging. You have been arranging a series of talks, sir. I have attended also previous some of the talks.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Khan sir also, sir, thank you all very much. Also, you have explained about the detail about the agriculture scenario of India as well as different agricultural situation of our country. Sir, just I want.
Can you introduce yourself, Doctor?
I am Dr. S.K. Sahu from Uttar Banga Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, West Bengal.
Oh.
West Bengal. I'm associate professor in entomology.
Right. Oh, same subject like mine.
Thank you, sir. Just Khan Sahab, you have explained such several things regarding agriculture of Indian agriculture. Just I want to know, just if you put some light, what is the status of agriculture education and research of our country in concern with developed countries? Status of Indian agriculture research and education in comparison with the developed countries, sir. If you put some light regarding this, then it will be.
Let me tell you on a happy note one side, which is a very large scientific institutional infrastructure that the country has created, which is unmatched. US and China put together do not match the strength of our scientific institutional infrastructure, which is 104 institutions under 80 universities under the state governments, and then about 900 Krishi Vigyan Kendras. So that is, and largest number of scientists working in agriculture anywhere in the world are working in India, about 30,000 scientists under the ICAR system itself. But system of evaluation has not been what it requires to be to meet the output with the world standards. Therefore, it is an area of concern that so much spending, so much institutional infrastructure, so much manpower strength put together, it is producing what it is expected to be. For example, Green Revolution, if you look at it, came with the foreign technology. Subsequently, many development, whether you look at fertilizers, not a single molecule we have been able to produce locally. We are one of the largest manufacturers of pesticide, but not the inventors of molecules. We are one of the largest producer and consumers of the chemical fertilizers, but not the inventors of. But in future, we are hopeful that as the knowledge businesses are expanding, the Indians are strong at knowledge businesses, which is coming out of our strength in software businesses. So we hope in future, when the more precision agriculture is followed, more inventions take place where the tools of information technology are applied, and more importantly, the role of startups. So collaborating with the institutions of India, the universities, the ICAR institutions, these entrepreneurs, they will produce the beautiful ideas and bring the solution. So I hope in the so far, to put it in a more modest way, ICAR played its role. Many varieties have been developed by universities and the ICAR system. But in terms of vaccines development, in terms of molecules development, in terms of inventions, we have actually not been able to keep pace and not justifying the huge infrastructure that we have got. So I hope in the years to come that private sector, public sector will make up for that loss, will accelerate the process of more innovations, more inventions, more discoveries, more new varieties, more new molecules.
I really like the question from Dr. S.K. Sahu and equally beautifully answered by Dr. Khan. Let me take last attempt with Kanchan Bagla. Hi Kanchan, are you there? Others will move on. Okay, looks there's some issue with Kanchan and earlier speaker attendee. Dr. Saab, it was fun talking to you and such a natural flow that came from you. 18 minutes just went away like this. One of the best discussions I've enjoyed, and thank you so much for coming on this show. And हम बोलते हैं जैसे शो की शोभा बढ़ाया आपने, and so much contribution to the Indian agriculture, to various aspects, to various not just you're contributing in your own way, but you're influencing the entire environment that what should be done and how it should be done. and moving forward. And one of the things which I like to take away from here is that how do you shorten the cycle? अगर आप 4 महीने में बोलते तो मैं 30 दिन में करूंगा. If you ask 4 months, you want to do it in 30 days. And when doubling of farmer income, the country says 2022, you said no, do it in 4 years. I think that urgency is required in most of the things. So the things would have its own speed and get the things moving. Next up, it was pleasure having you on my show, Ray Talks, and we will have you more often so that the whole world will come to know a lot of knowledge which you have been आपके अंदर भरा पड़ा है. So we'll try to get it out. And audience and attendees, thank you so much. As usual, you've been helping, supporting this Ray Talks, which started in this pandemic times. But thanks to the love and support from all of you, we are ensuring that every Saturday leaders like Dr. Khan come to us. We chat with them and then bring knowledge to all of you. Thank you so much. And those of you who have missed some of our episodes, you can see all those episodes are uploaded on YouTube/Ray Consulting. For the updates, you can visit our Facebook page and LinkedIn page and stay in touch. And next Saturday, I have a very interesting subject, or people who are doing an awesome thing. The guys who have sacrificed their cushiony, outstanding IT jobs, and they've come into this agri-value chain. Kalgudi directors and founders will be talking to me. And next week on 5th of September, I have another stalwart, Dr. Ram Kaundania, who is another outstanding contributor to the Indian agriculture. So we have a series lined up. So every Saturday at 4 o'clock, we'll try and see all of you and answer your questions and do something a bit from our part for the Indian agriculture. Next up, thank you once again for joining me, and it was wonderful talking to you. Your parting message to the audience, please.
Thank you, Raj, for the opportunity, and thank you all the audience that has been through this discussion. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Good day and greetings from Seedworks. My name is Vasantawada Venkatram. I work as CEO for Seedworks International Private Limited, based out of Hyderabad, India. Seedworks' vision is to provide superior seed solutions by harnessing technologies and innovation to create value for all stakeholders in a sustainable manner. At Seedworks, we are committed to enhance the livelihood of the farming community by closely working with public, private, and civil society to meet the national goal of doubling up the farmers' income. The introduction of Agriculture 4.0 has paved the way for a new space in agriculture, which we now call as the agri-tech sector. Companies use the latest and emerging technologies in agri-sector as an engine for sustainable growth. At Seedworks, being a life science and technology company, we are focusing on digitization and innovation as levers to meet the social, environmental, and the economic growth of the seed ecosystem.